This is Newsroom on SABC News. Hello and welcome. From Johannesburg in South Africa, I'm Eben Jansen. The show is broadcast live every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Highlights are then repeated at 2 in the afternoon with a complete rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning. We're also streaming live on YouTube between 9 and 10 a.m. every day, with the entire show available on our YouTube channel all the time, which means you can catch it anywhere in the world at any time. Today, we take a look at the opening of Parliament and President Jacob Zuma's State of the Nation address later this evening. Teen suicide accounts for 1 in every 10 teen deaths in South Africa. And celebrated British journalist, author and playwright Victoria Brittain will join us in studio later on. But first, let's take a look at the news headlines. Job creation and the need to boost domestic and international investor confidence are expected to be some of the key features of the State of the Nation address. It will be delivered by President Jacob Zuma in Parliament tonight. The theme for the address is 20 years of a democratic parliament. President Zuma is also likely to outline steps to address economic challenges, unemployment and poverty. Service delivery protests are also likely to feature. Gauteng police have been commended for preventing potentially violent clashes from erupting between the ANC and the DA in Johannesburg yesterday. Chaos broke out during the march yesterday with petrol bombs, bricks and stones being flung. 4 people wearing ANC T-shirts were arrested for public violence. Johannesburg Metro Police confirmed the ANC gathering was illegal. The DA is now deciding on taking legal action against the ANC. Cricket Australia, courtesy of an unbeaten 199-run fifth wicket partnership, are in a commanding position after day 1 of the first test at Centurion. South Africa won the toss and chose to field. For a while it looked like the right decision as the Proteas struck with some early wickets. At stumps though, South Africa found themselves under the cosh as Australia had piled on 297 for the loss of 4 wickets. It's a cliche, but it's all systems go as the South African Parliament draws closer to a landmark opening this evening. The occasion will mark 20 years of democracy and see President Jacob Zuma deliver his 6th State of the Nation address. Preparations have been underway for weeks now in Cape Town. Tamiso Mashaba takes a keen look at the role that the military will play in today's proceedings.
A buzz with activity as hundreds of workers put in the hours to ensure that Parliament is in pristine condition ahead of its official opening night. The opening of Parliament is a formal occasion that sees all 3 arms of the state come together to execute their constitutional roles in full view of the nation, as demonstrated by the formal processions up Parliament Street. Central to all the pomp and ceremony of the event is the role of the military.
Over 1,200 of our members, the members of the South African National Defence Force, are formed up at the Castle of Good Hope, as you call it, the slave house. And they are ready to march up Strand Street into Adelaide Street and do the street lining. The street lining is then SANDF members who will then display the national flag. The Cape Field Artillery Band is then escorting the flag company. You will have 9 South African Infantry Battalion, followed by the Cape Town Highlanders, a Reserve Force unit, and the Cape Town Rifles. And they will be brought in by the Army Band, Western Cape.
And by the time the President's motorcade drives up Adelaide Street to Parliament, various divisions of the SANDF, like the Army, the Navy and the Air Force, would have long been in position along the route. The vehicle that will be used by the President was originally designed for the visit of the previous Pope, John Paul, when he visited South Africa in 1995.
The National Ceremonial Guard will then present arms when the President make his presence on the steps, and while the national anthem is playing. While the anthem is playing, the 21 gun salute will be sounded by Cape Field Artillery. And during the actual ceremony, we will also see the Air Force do the fly past.
The tradition of rendering a salute by firing cannon originated in the 14th century when cannon and firearms came into use. In 1842, the 21-gun salute became the international norm for the highest honor a nation rendered to a person. Ordinary citizens will be represented by the Junior Guard of Honor in the street lining, the Civilian Guard of Honor, and the eminent persons. This public participation component was introduced by former President Nelson Mandela.
You know what former President Nelson Mandela did? He reinvented protocol in a very interesting way, because the State of the Nation address ordinarily is a serious protocol ceremony. But what President Nelson Mandela did, which is unprecedented, was to integrate the public participation element in it. We're going to see hundreds of people who are going to be here, coming from all sectors of society.
Lozugo Jacobs says the planning that goes on behind the scenes is never the same with each passing year. But he adds that the 20-year anniversary of democracy will add a special feel to the occasion.
This is the 20th year of democracy. This is the last term of this fourth parliament. This is also the last State of the Nation address to this fourth parliament. All those things bring with them a totally different atmosphere to the State of the Nation address. There's a lot of emotion. We have members who have been part of this parliament and thus all the State of the Nation addresses from 1994. And there will be some for whom this will be the last. So it just changes a lot and brings a unique feeling to the whole concept of the State of the Nation address, fourth Parliament in 2014.
If the weather is good, the President will alight at the Slave Lodge immediately north of the entrance to the Parliamentary grounds. And if it rains, the presidential motorcade will drive up the entrance of the National Council of Provinces building and enter the building complex using the same route as the premiers of the provinces. Dumiso Mashaba, SABC News.
Yes, President Jacob Zuma will deliver his 6th State of the Nation address in Parliament in Cape Town tonight. An official opening of Parliament with all the pomp and ceremony will be broadcast before the President's speech. The theme of the speech will commemorate 20 years of democracy. 5.7 million rand has been budgeted for the event, which they say is 2 million rand cheaper than last year. A second State of the Nation address will be delivered shortly after the upcoming national election. That'll be on the 7th of May. Joining us now from Parliament is our reporter, Abra Barbia. Good morning, Abra.
Hi, Eben. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for joining us. Just let's start with the significance of the State of the Nation address and then maybe a couple of pointers. What can we expect from the President tonight?
Well, Eben, the State of the Nation address quite literally is the day that the President addresses the nation about what's happening in the country. So he focuses on the political situation in the country, the socio-economic situation. He speaks about the achievements that the country's made after over the last year. And he also, of course, looks at the challenges that we've been through since last year. And he maps out the way forward, you know, government's plan for the country going forward. Now, what is so special about today is that this is one of those very rare occasions where the three arms of government actually get together. So we have the executive, which is the president, the deputy president, and their various ministers. We have the judiciary, where we would have members of the legal fraternity represented, and then public participation, which is so important in this day. And that is where various members of the public will actually be here today, representing so many of them who couldn't actually come here physically. Now, today is actually what's been described as a bittersweet SONA because, of course, this is our first SONA in our democratic South Africa that our founding father, Nelson Mandela, will not be here. And he played such an integral role in public participation. When he first became president of this country, he insisted that the gates of Parliament be flung open to members of the public so that they could be here and just join in the day. So they would be represented by a civil guard of honor, a junior civil guard of honor, Honor who would be representing the youth of the nation. And then, of course, we would have eminent people from around the country who are invited. And these are people who have done outstanding things in their communities. Eben, I'm not sure if the viewers can see behind me down Parliament Avenue. Right now, it's not really very busy, but within the next few hours, this section is going to be so busy. It's going to be a hive of activity. This is where the red carpet is going to be laid down. You know, the fashion, everybody loves the fashion and the pomp and ceremony of today. It's not only all about the speech. Everybody comes here. It's the one time MPs can be, you know, gorgeous and beautiful. So this area is going to be filled with cameramen and photographers and journalists wanting to get pictures of who's wearing what. Our 9 premiers will be coming down here. They'll be entering through here. We'll have bands all over the precinct. So today's really just going to be a glorious day full of activity, and we will be here throughout the day to bring it to our viewers, so they must please stay tuned. Eben?
Eben, tell us about the theme for today's event, how it will be commemorated and then celebrated in Parliament later tonight.
Today is this year is 20 years of democracy that this country is celebrating. So there already seems to be celebrations happening behind us as they're obviously playing the music right now. But the theme is it speaks to the 20 years of democracy that will all be factored in to the day's events. And of course, because this year is an election year, this will be our first SONA for the year. We will have another SONA later on in the year after the elections have been completed. So yes, Eben, that's how the theme is going to be celebrated this year, with music and fanfare and fun.
And what about Madiba's legacy? Are we going to see that being factored into the day at all?
Yes, I was actually looking around the precinct over the past few days, looking out for photos of him and posters of him, and there are massive banners of Madiba all over the precinct. Of course, President Jacob Zuma is bound to speak about Madiba and his legacy. I mean, that's a given. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the public participation itself, that is his legacy. That is what he wanted for Parliament and for the public, to bring the public closer to Parliament, because this is about the public. This is where laws are made. This, you know, what happens here directly affects the people of this nation. So their presence here, that is all just part of Madiba's legacy.
You touched on it briefly earlier, but opening of Parliament is always a lot about fashion. Who are the fashionistas in Parliament that we should be looking out for?
Do you know, it changes from year to year. The MPs every day, they have to come to work in suits and ties. And our female MPs, some of them, shame, they do try to be a bit flamboyant in the committees, but generally they suit it up. But I know Helen Zille normally goes way out with her. She wears gowns. And there's a gentleman from Cope who likes wearing, he's of Scottish descent. He likes wearing a kilt, and he always reminds us every year he's not wearing anything under that kilt. And often members of Parliament, their wives, they come dressed up quite nicely as well. But we will definitely be here bringing you all of those visuals later on.
Is it within the protocols of Parliament to go in there without underwear on?
I'm yet to find that one out, Eben.
Okay, well, I'm going to count on you to ask that question a little bit later. But just finally, Abra, just tell us about the preparations and just give us a quick update what will happen throughout the rest of the morning.
Preps actually started towards the end of last year, which is standard procedure. From December, January, I mean, we've seen Parliament being cleaned up, paint jobs, you know, there's scaffolding everywhere, which obviously means that there were teams out here just making sure that the precinct is neat. And then over the last, I think it was 2-3 days, I think the last 2 days, yes, the streets of Cape Town were actually shut down because there were full rehearsals in place with the military bands and everybody. They were marching in the streets, the guys of the police on their horses, they were all rehearsing. So that's all part of the preps. And they will be here later on. The military band, they are normally positioned right here where I'm standing right now. So they will all come in later on, and they'll start providing us with entertainment.
Thank you very much, Abra Barbier, for that contribution. You look lovely, and keep us informed as to how the rest of the day develops.
Will do, Eben. Thanks.
That's Abra Barbier coming to you live from Cape Town, actually outside of Parliament, where, just to recap, President Jacob Zuma will be delivering the his sixth State of the Nation address tonight. He will use the speech to deliver an assessment of government's performance. The theme for tonight's address is 20 years of democratic parliament. Yesterday, President Zuma spent the day entertaining guests at his Genadendal residence down in Cape Town. Well, unfortunately, we've got some technical difficulty with that tape, so we're going to pass that by and take a look at what you're thinking and saying on social media. Of course, SONA is on everyone's lips at the moment. If you don't know what SONA is, it's the State of the Nation address, and you can send your comments, of course, to @SABC Newsroom. That's our Twitter page, sabc.co.za/news. That's where you can find all of the updates all of the time. Lucia, do we have comments? Yeah, there we go. Comments are coming in thick and fast. Nkomomhle says, I have a feeling the President will deliver his best SONA yet tonight. Madam Boo says, this weather must not sabotage the SONA red carpet. Well, my dear, the weather looks good in Cape Town. They say it's going to be very hot, and we saw Abra there reporting earlier. It looks like she's wearing a summer dress, so it's all looking good. Tando says, traffic in the CBD is madness already. Good thing that President Zuma moved the SONA to the evening. Indeed. Well, those are just some of your comments coming in at the moment. Keep it coming at SABC Newsroom. That's on our Twitter page, sabc.co.za/news. That's where you get all the updates. And on our YouTube channel, well, you can watch all of the goings on at Parliament throughout the day. Even the speech will be streamed live tonight. That starts at 7 o'clock, and the broadcast starts about an hour or so before that. After a short break, while we chat to celebrated British journalist, author and playwright Victoria Brittain, who's in South Africa. You're watching Newsroom on SABC News.
It's the biggest gathering of the year. So get the best seat in the house. The State of the Nation address by President Jacob Zuma. Only on the SABC News channel this Thursday at 5 p.m.
Good evening and welcome to Kaleidoscope, the show that brings you the very best of Africa to the world. Just a few kilometers away from the hustle and bustle of the city is an animal sanctuary known as the Lion Park. Our great team went to go check out and see if the lion is still singing tonight.
Among all of the cat's family, cheetahs are the most easiest to train or to tame.
A youth leader in South Africa said if white people don't like it, that the youth are going to lead South Africa, they can adapt or fly. And I said, thank you for the title. So again, I thank politicians for my title.
That's Kaleidoscope, Sundays, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. You're still with Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, teen suicide is increasingly becoming a widespread cause of death amongst teenagers in South Africa. Next week is Teen Suicide Prevention Week, when the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, SADAG, holds talks at schools, in communities and companies. 9.5% of teen deaths in South Africa are due to suicide, and SADAG's school-based awareness program, Suicide Shouldn't Be a Secret, is an important education program in the fight to prevent teen suicide. Today, in our studio, we have Dr. Helen Clark, a psychologist, as well as Tlubimboya, one of the youth ambassadors of SADAG and a very well-known face here in South Africa. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Let's start with the bad news. Dr. Clark, how big a problem are we facing with teen suicide in South Africa?
I doubt if we really know how big the problem is, but the figures that are being put out at the moment are about 1 in 5 adolescents will make an attempt at suicide. Those are the figures that are running at the moment.
1 in 5, that's almost up to 20%.
Yes.
Why is that?
I think our adolescents are in a very difficult and stressed situation. I think there's a perception that you attempt suicide because you're depressed. But the reality is a lot of our adolescents, the majority of them who make suicide attempts, are actually making impulsive gestures that are reactionary to a baseline emotional state that's generated from stressful contexts, the kind of chaotic context in which we're all living, but in which our adolescents are living, very often quite unsupported by the systems that should be supporting them.
Yeah. Now, Tlubi, I want to come to you because you are involved with the program Suicide Shouldn't Be a Secret. Tell us about this campaign and how it's been received at the moment.
It's basically called the We Care. Well, that's the terminology I like to use. It's a We Care campaign. And Eben, you know what? It's not about giving just the parents or the adolescents the tools to be able to recognize those trigger points. I do a lot of work with teenage girls, and different from Dr. Helen, I'm in Deep Sloot and she works in Barra. And there was an incident where a girl came to a forum and she said she tried to commit suicide the day before by taking a lot of Panados, and it really struck home for me that her friends didn't know, I didn't know, and it happened, the fact that she came through the day after, thank goodness still alive, really brought an awareness that what if we had seen these signs? What if there were help stress signals that we could have picked up? Maybe it wouldn't have gone to that extent. Yeah. And obviously we all know the social ills of Deep Sloot. So as Dr. Helen said, it really is an environmental kind of attachment of an impulsive kind of stress signal that a kid wants to attempt suicide. So for me, it's giving me the tools where I can be able to engage with these young girls and not even try and prevent it myself, but just have open lines of communication prior to it being determined as a suicide attempt.
That is obviously so important, is to allow children to communicate. But I want you to demystify for us a little bit, to the parents out there. Tell us about the early warning signs of when your child becomes a threat or a threat to themselves.
I think that the most important thing to realize is that you're not going to pick up the warning signs unless you are aware of your adolescent, unless you're aware of what's going on with your adolescent, and that is the problem. But I think that adolescents do put out warning signs, even though their acts are impulsive. They put out signs of emotional instability, not necessarily depression, but emotional instability, changes in behavior, changes in their capacity to integrate into the school world, into the community, into the home. But they also do really try sometimes to communicate as directly as they can with their caregivers, and very often these attempts at communication are missed. I think because there is not a receptive environment to picking up messages of distress, very often our adolescents are turning to social media, they're communicating with faceless spaces in an attempt to say, I'm not coping, I'm struggling. But because there's no face to it, there's no space to it, very often the actual level of distress of the adolescent isn't picked up, and therefore the response is not what the adolescent needs to actually help them. One has to be looking for the warning signs in order to pick them up.
There seems to be a lot of pressure on teenagers throughout, and it almost looks like social media is not really helping in a way, because you're almost a little bit disconnected from the reality of real friendships and real interactions.
Yeah, but I do a lot of motivational speaking, and I always say, you know what, kids, to be a champion and to be your own hero, you really have to take responsibility for your own words, especially when it's things like Twitter and mix it in Facebook, because words can bless and curse someone, you know, and for kids, they really take that really seriously. That basically is their life, and I love the fact that yesterday at the launch of Teen Prevention Week, we actually really touched base on it, and it's so imperative that we've got to relate to these kids in the way that they can understand best. And I think social media is a way that they can understand best. And what I love is the fact that SADC is really coming in partnerships with social medias, whereby you know there's an open forum of positive communication with kids and with SADC itself.
How do you, as a parent, make a distinction between manipulation? You know, children today, they like to manipulate their parents. How do you make a distinction between that and a real threat?
Well, first of all, you act on the side of caution. So every suicide attempt is a potential suicide and must be taken like that. But one should see suicide attempts as being one of two things: either attempts with intent, where my actual intent is to die, and the other avenue is that I'm trying to communicate something. I'm trying to communicate my distress in an indirect way, because you're not picking up my direct signals. But the biggest problem is that our adolescents make these gestures, they make suicide attempts, they display self-destructive behaviours, and very often the response of the people around them, the caregivers, the schools, etc., is such that it doesn't pick up on the distress. And the problem then is it reinforces the behaviour and causes repetition of the behaviour. And it's what we're seeing is that patterns of significant repeat of these behaviours. And as I said, every suicide attempt is a potential suicide. Yeah. So what we need to do is stop the cycle of not responding adequately and getting repeated.
And really, that's where I really want to try and make that difference. I want to be able to recognize, or give them or their friends the tools to recognize. And, you know, there's nothing worse than feeling so hopeless when a teenager's come to you after they've tried it. So I want to be able to be that middle leg and say, hey, I can see there's a problem here, and let's kind of go to Dr. Helen's group and talk about it.
Finally, just tell us, and you've both got 30 seconds, how do you as a parent deal with a suicidal teen?
I, for one, I would really want to know pickup signs, and that's exactly what SADC really is trying to feed us as parents, as caregivers, as educators, as mentors. Also, the toll-free helpline, 0800 567 567, which is 7 days a week, 24 hours, and those are the mediums which the kids can really go and be able to connect and conversate with teens in the same kind of distress level, or people that can really have a meaningful difference.
My message to caregivers is improve the level of communication you have with your adolescents, full stop. Yeah. Because if you improve that level and your adolescents trust you, they will communicate with you when they need to. And if they can communicate their need for help, you're in so much better a position to help them.
Well, ladies, thank you for joining us this morning, and all the best with next week. We hope that you get a lot more awareness, and we save many more lives, because it's a scourge that seems to be on the increase in our society.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Well, let's just take a second look at what you are talking about on social media. Of course, yesterday there was a march in the city that caught all the headlines for all the wrong reasons. And Josh, if I can start with Josh Mkonazi, why march against an intent, a manifesto in this case? Has the DA lost the election already? Hence, they think it's best to deal with the ANC's future intentions now. Very smart observation. Sapiri talks about that he's still scratching his head in an attempt to fathom what the DA march was about. If the DA have a bone to chew with the ANC election route, it is. Highly intelligent there. Daniel Silka, ANC reaction to DA march will unsettlingly raise tension surrounding critical issue of political tolerance in the coming elections. That is a very poignant point because we seem to be suffering of political intolerance at an increasing level in South Africa. Pati Dagada talks about, I can hear the stun grenades going off here in the CBD. That was the case yesterday. There were also petrol bombs and half bricks going off all around the place. There were some interesting observations. Later, when we go digital, we'll show you some pictures about, well, some DA members changing T-shirts and putting on ANC T-shirts in town. It was a very interesting day indeed. At SABC Newsroom is where we are living. That's where you can send your contributions. After the next break, well, we're going to talk to Victoria Brittain. Interesting lady. This is Newsroom on SABC News.
What time is it? It's question time.
Your electricity has been cut. Do you not want your councillor to intervene?
I'd rather buy a generator. We will never be found among the protesters. We don't toy-toy, we don't complain about service delivery.
That's question time with me, Mpho Tsedu, Monday to Saturday, 5:30 p.m. on SABC News.
How does then media balance those two, responsible reporting and also keeping it factual?
If you're a journalist, and especially a journalist writing a story for a front page, you have to report the facts. The fact is she came to like a fashionista to court.
Once again, media be given credit for carrying the story since its inception.
The media has been very brilliant, and I think they walked the extra mile.
Where is the media in giving us the both sides of the story?
One of the issues with e-tolls is that it really has been a hard news story. And so I can understand why social media has been so effective, because breaking news is digital. And so we're going to get breaking news on that platform and then move into the other platforms of media coverage.
That's Media Monitor, Sundays at 9 a.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. You with Newsroom on SABC News. Let's take a quick look at the news headlines. Job creation and the need to boost economic and international investor confidence are expected to be some of the key features of the State of the Nation address. It will be delivered by President Jacob Zuma in Parliament tonight. The theme for the address is 20 years of a democratic parliament. President Zuma is also likely to outline steps to address economic challenges, unemployment and poverty. Service delivery protests are also likely to feature. Gauteng police have been commended for preventing potentially violent clashes from erupting between the ANC and the DA in Johannesburg yesterday. Chaos broke out during the march with petrol bombs, bricks and stones being flung. 4 people wearing ANC T-shirts were arrested for public violence. Johannesburg Metro Police confirmed the ANC gathering was illegal. The DA is now deciding on taking legal action against the ANC. And in cricket, Australia on top after the first day of the first cricket test at Centurion. At the close of play, the Aussies were on 297 for the loss of 4 wickets, with Shaun Marsh unbeaten on 122 runs. Celebrated British journalist and author and playwright Victoria Brittain is in South Africa to promote her latest book, Shadow Lives, The Forgotten Women of the War on Terror. She has lived and worked as a journalist all around the world. The book reveals the unseen side of the war on terror, its impact on the wives and families of men incarcerated in Guantanamo or in prison or under house arrest in Britain. Now, in studio with us today, we have Victoria Brittain. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
We're very honoured to have you here in our country and even more so to have you on our show.
Thank you.
I want to start the interview, because it's such a weighty issue that we go. I want to start with a little quote from Barack Obama. If we can put it up, guys, and just give your opinion on this.
Our systematic effort to dismantle terrorist organizations must continue. But this war, like all wars, must end. That's what history advises. It's what our democracy demands.
Barack Obama is obviously talking about the war on terror that must end. It seems to be such a vague concept. Will we ever see this in my lifetime?
Well, I think the war on terror, to start with, was a completely meaningless phrase, and it's turned into something completely different, which I call the forever war. But just to go back to the war on terror, in response to a criminal act of 9/11 in New York and Pennsylvania and Washington, Bush announced a war on terror. It was a phrase which, what was it supposed to cover? Well, what we immediately knew was an attack on Afghanistan, where the government was trying to negotiate with the Americans a court appearance for Osama bin Laden for responsibility for 9/11. Then there was the war on Iraq, which was a state that had nothing to do with 9/11, as everybody knows. Then there was the rounding up of 700 men and bringing them to Guantanamo Bay. And many of those men were bought by the Americans for bounties of $5,000 was offered for all over Afghanistan and Pakistan for these men. So a ramshackle collection of people arrived. People came from as far away as, I don't know if your viewers know, a man was arrested in Gambia. A man was arrested in Zambia. It was like the whole world was a target. And as we know, what happened in Guantanamo Bay, it's amazing to think that 12 years on, men today, as we sit here, are on hunger strike in Guantanamo Bay prison when they have been cleared as innocent by the American authorities 5 years ago.
Yeah. I want to talk about Guantanamo Bay, because this was one of the first election of Barack Obama. This was one of the promises that he made to the entire world, that Guantanamo Bay would be shut within his first term. Hasn't happened. Will it happen? Ever?
He has made it incredibly difficult, and the Congress has also made it incredibly difficult, because a lot of the men that they have there now, the only evidence against them comes from torture. And under all legal norms, you cannot try somebody on evidence brought by torture. So the whole kind of legal system that was broken by the war on terror, the Americans, when they decided no Geneva Conventions, torture is okay, kidnapping people all over the world and bringing them to a place where there is no law, because they didn't choose Guantanamo Bay by chance. You know, it's occupied Cuba, but it doesn't have American law, so you can do exactly what you like.
There's always a human face within all conflict. The book that you've written, The Forgotten Women of the War on Terror, you've become quite close, I understand, to some of these women. Tell us about the human face and the deep-seated emotion involved in this.
Well, I'll tell you, there are two women in my book whose husbands, one was in Guantanamo and one still is in Guantanamo. And the first one, Saba, is a Palestinian. This is a woman who, with her husband, were refugees in Britain. And her husband went on a business trip to Gambia to start a peanut oil business. And from there, he was kidnapped to Afghanistan, tortured, and then taken to Guantanamo Bay. She has 5 children. The youngest one was born after her husband was in Guantanamo Bay. So when he came home, he hadn't met this child. And Saba, my friend, has kept a home in London over 5 years with almost no input, no connection with her husband. For years, the Americans never delivered her letters. But she kept that family going and created, miraculously, a kind of home full of joy, and always minimized the children. as she did to her mother, what she was actually feeling, the pain in her heart. She would go out, step outside the house in the night to cry, or sit in the park with her hijab when her emotions were too much, so the children wouldn't see her. She sheltered everybody from what she felt, and she did a totally miraculous job.
So only a woman could really do that, I suppose. You're in South Africa. We're very honoured to have you here. But tell us about your tour in South Africa and what you expect to achieve here.
Well, it's been amazing. Since I've been here, I've found every meeting that I've spoken in and every radio or TV that I've done, people are so interested in these women and so ready to see the human side of the victims. And I've been very, very moved by that. And of course, it's because South Africans, if you start talking about house arrest, everybody has it in their family history or their neighborhood history. So I think people relate very much to the terrible illegalities and inhumanity of the war on terror here.
On a sort of personal level, why did you write this book?
Well, I wrote it completely by chance. I became friends with the woman. First, that woman that I've talked about, and then many friends of hers, and then many other women began to approach me. And I think it was because they were so lonely that people feared, because of the idea of terrorism. Muslims in particular didn't want to become friendly with them. So I just gradually became friendly with them. And they then pressed me to write a book. Or first of all, to write a play. And they would joke with me and saying, I thought you were supposed to be a writer. How come you write about everybody else and not about us, and we're your closest friends? So it's a collaborative effort.
Well, we wish you all the best with what's left of your tour to South Africa and all the success going forward. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
That's celebrated British journalist, author and playwright Victoria Brittain, who is in South Africa promoting her book, Shadow Lives, The Forgotten Women of the War on Terror. Go out and buy it if you can. It's a fantastic read. We move on to one of our top stories. The Democratic Alliance is considering taking legal action against the ANC. Police were forced to stop the party's march from proceeding to Beyers Nadir Square near the ANC's Luthuli House headquarters. Chaos broke out during yesterday's march, with petrol bombs, bricks and stones being flung at DA supporters as well as the police.
Armed with bricks and stones and other weapons, and the police have just allowed them to gather here. And we have to expose how violent and intolerant the ANC has become, and that they don't want the lies in their manifesto exposed.
DA is creating a very unnecessary tension, provocation and confrontation on the streets, because everybody knows that once you want to march, if you march against another party, the members are going to respond in a way that nobody can actually manage.
Political tolerance, a key indicator of a vibrant democratic culture, was heavily tested during this march. These clashes, another sign of rising tensions ahead of the May 7 poll. Yudis Njamela, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Well, it was a heavyweight political day on the South African landscape. So let's take a look at what's been happening in the online space and on social media front. Joining me are SABC's digital news production editor Bongi Mokhale and producer Stembiso Sitole. Good morning, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Morning, Eben.
Good morning, Eben.
I want to ask, it was such a big day yesterday. It was all over all of our platforms, what happened in the CBD. But if I can start with Stembiso, you were in town. You did all the coverage. Tell us what happened yesterday and some of the real high points and low points that you came across.
Well, basically what happened in the morning, I was up, I think at 22:07. I was on my way to Luthuli House. And when I got there, I got a lot of ANC supporters packed outside. And what was happening, initially the DA was supposed to be marching there to Luthuli House, but they were booked too much at Beyers Nadir, where they were going to hand in the petition. And we all know that, you know, it was expected that it was going to turn chaotic. We did a lot of stories there. Photo Snack, which was also their gallery, where we're just showing what was happening. As you would know, that DA supporters were there, ANC supporters, carrying bricks, you know, throwing at some of the people there within the DA. It was just hectic.
How was it all received on social media and on our online platforms, Bongi? It must have been heavy traffic yesterday.
It was extremely heavy traffic. Yesterday, we put together quite a long story flyer with people's views and what people were saying. I mean, they started speaking about this from when the initial march, the first time the march had been scheduled, and then it had to be rescheduled after the court action. People expecting all kinds of things to happen. A bit of humor thrown in. You'll remember that the Avengers is also being, the Avengers 2 is also being filmed in the CBD. Yeah. So there were some people busy commenting that, you know, the DA is just trying to get a bit of free publicity and get themselves into the movie.
A bit of Hollywood time.
Just throwing a little bit of the humor in just to lighten what was, in fact, and what could have been a very, 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 very sad incident.
Simbisa, you were there, and it must have been quite hectic, but there's a big fear factor involved. You told me earlier before we came on that there was a point where you saw some of the DA marchers taking their DA shirts off and putting ANC shirts on. Was that the case?
It was the case, and it was interesting because you'd understand that we were not expecting that. We were expecting the march, and here we were there standing, and we saw the DA people changing shirts. They're from Guatemala, and they're simply saying they are joining the ANC. As you can see down there, that they're saying they're joining the ANC, they are leaving the DA. So it was quite interesting, and we're not expecting that.
Why were they leaving the DA? I thought they came to protest against the ANC.
Well, they said they decided that they want to join the new party, which is going forward, rather than the other party, which represents a certain group of individuals.
Bongi, what was the main sort of sense amongst users on the net? Was there a sense that this was antagonism, or was it a sense of aggression from ANC supporters?
The views were wide and varied. Some people felt that the DA was misguided in their approach to highlight the issue of real jobs. They felt that it had nothing to do with the ANC, but at the same time, it was like, if you want to march, you really should be able to march. Yeah. From people who were more in support of the ANC's right to defend Luthuli House, they were saying, well, this is just unjust. They're provoking us. You're not going to be able to do this. We might be the ruling party, but we are not the ones who push through the government policies. So, you know, you do have these things. And I think there were just some who were just out for a fight. And you have the fight in the streets, and you'll also have the fight online.
Yeah, absolutely. We love fighting online because we can be anonymous and we can be bigoted in our views and can be really hectic with each other. Let's move on from this. I actually want to go down the list a little bit further because it's Valentine's Day tomorrow, and you know, it marks the first anniversary of Reeva Steenkamp's death. Let's talk about that before I come back to the other stuff, because we're running out of time a little bit. Tell us about what we can expect and how we're going to cover it.
Well, you'll note that this was a huge social media event in and of itself, apart from being a huge news event. So we've got sort of documentary videos going up just to show what's been happening, what happened on that day last year, and what's expected to come with the trial, which is starting on the 3rd of March. Oscar Pistorius' trial, excuse me. So this is what we're going to be doing, throwing forward to that. We had lots of analysis. Remember at the time, there was sort of like, why is Oscar being excused? Why do sportsmen do these sorts of things? Yeah. A lot has been happening with that. A lot of stuff has been coming out. So we're going to be documenting all of that. We'll be sourcing from online, sourcing from TV, and sourcing from radio. So there's quite a feast available.
There's quite a feast, and you're also doing the State of the Nation, and there's also the accident videos and all of that sort of stuff. But it seems that we've run out of time. Godfrey's telling me that I've got to wrap it up. But fantastic contribution today. That was real fantastic work you did in the city there, Stembi, so thank you.
Yeah, thanks, man. I think this is what people should look for, I mean, in terms of we're heading to the elections later evening with the State of the Nation address from the President.
Absolutely, and our digital platforms, of course, production editor Bongi Mohale always brings us the juice. Thank you, Bongi.
Yeah. Thank you.
Fantastic. Let's take a final look of what you are talking about on social media. Of course, it was a massacre yesterday at Centurion where... well, Keenan says, big day at the office for the Proteas. Need something special from Dale Steyn. Well, Dale Steyn was sick yesterday, so he couldn't really deliver the goods, and the Aussies gave us a bit of a clap. Oz in a strong position after day one. Let's see what they say after today. I have a feeling the kitchen will get hot. That's Werner Klokov. And then Neil says, what on earth could possibly motivate Graham Smith to bowl first at Centurion? Known Dale Steyn was ill. Perhaps Mitchell Johnson? Well, that's a little bit cheeky there, Neil. Full name says, Proteas need a couple of quick wickets. Can't believe the tail is wagging so well. It's not even the tail, it's the middle order. Well, those are your thoughts. Keep it coming at SABC Newsroom. That's where we're at. Of course, sabc.co.za/news. That's where you get all the stuff. Bongi and the team will give it to you all of the time. Newsroom closes today with a look at the start of South Africa's most famous canoe race down in KwaZulu-Natal. The 63rd edition of the Doozy Canoe Marathon kicked off just a few hours ago. This show, of course, broadcast live every weekday morning between 9 and 10 a.m. Highlights are repeated at 2 in the afternoon with a rebroadcast at 5 a.m. the following morning. We're also streaming live on YouTube between 9 and 10 a.m. every day with the entire show available all day on our YouTube channel. You're watching SABC News. This was Newsroom, where we love it in the morning.
It's the biggest gathering of the year. So get the best seat in the house. The State of the Nation address by President Jacob Zuma. Only on the SABC News channel this Thursday at 5 p.m.
This is Libya. The chairman of the General National Congress is Mr. Nouri Abu Samen. Libya got independent from Italy on 10 February in 1947. The population is more than 6 million people. One of Libya's major languages spoken is Arabic. Monetary unit, Libyan dinar.
Women in Islam, oppressed and subjugated. This is often the misconceived perception of the status of women in Islam. However, this cannot be further from the truth. Hijab, or covering your head with a scarf, is not only a form of modest dress, but also allows the Muslimah to be identified and treated with respect.
Hijab in Islam literally means the way of dress of a Muslim woman. Islam teaches us that a Muslim woman should be covered, her full body should be covered except that which is apparent, and that is her face and her hands. According to some of the Muslim scholars as well, they include the face and the hands. So literally hijab means the covering of the woman's body, but hijab also comes with certain modesty and